In this video about the development of relationships, I'm going to talk about different factors that influence whether we're likely to get together with someone. And that could be a friend, a romantic partner, whatever. So it doesn't always have to mean a romantic partner. And please don't get your hopes up because I can't guarantee that I'm going to cover some kind of manual for how to get together with people. So you might learn some things along the way that are useful, though. So here goes. First factor that influences who we will end up becoming relational partners with is proximity, and that is just physical closeness. What do I mean by that? I mean that you're more likely to be friends or romantic partners with people who are near you, whether that is people in your dorm, people you work with, or live nearby if you're off campus, or find yourself crossing paths with a lot. So it could be in social places too. So fairly obvious there, but you may want to pause and think about, the people in your dorm or the hallway you're in or whatever, and you know, give some thought to that. So because those are the people you're most likely to develop relationships with. Of course, in college it changes so often that it's not like anything's permanent at this point anyway. So okay, proximity, impressions of each other. Again, this is fairly obvious, but what is less obvious is why first impressions are so important. So I'm going to explain briefly. First of all, they form fairly quickly. We can make really quick snap judgments of people. In fact, there's some interesting research that talks about it basically has people look at 30 seconds of information on somebody. So maybe 30 seconds of a teacher teaching or whatever. And from that, they call it thin slice research. From that thin slice of information, people can make an impression. Or not only can they, but they do. And at least in that study, what was interesting is they compared end of the semester evaluations of look. So they had people look at teachers teaching for like 30 seconds. They picked just a 30-second snippet from early in the semester, and they had them rate those teachers just based on 30 seconds. Well, those ratings actually were strongly related or fairly strongly related to how that teacher's students, a different group of people, people who didn't do the initial rating, how those students evaluated the teacher at the end of the semester. So it's kind of scary to think that it takes very little to form such a lasting impression. And one of the issues is that once we form an impression, they're not easy to change. Of course they can and they do all the time. So I'm not saying that it's forever. But what basically happens is we kind of fit that person into a schema. And I know you know that term because I've used it in other videos. So we fit that person into a schema that we develop a fairly fixed sense of who they are. And yes, it can change, but it takes work to change that schema for who they are. So if you have a schema for, think of someone you don't care for that much, you know, so when that name comes up, you think of, marginally negative things, right? Well, that can change, but it's going to take effort because every time you interact with that person, you're automatically going to be inclined to see them in a slightly more negative way. And they have to work hard to kind of get out of that negative shadow, so to speak. So, so once we form impressions, we like to stick to them. Of course, we change them over time, but it's easier to get off on a good start and rather than getting off on a negative start. And that third point, they shape the way others act to us. That's kind of why. Let's say I make a bad first impression on somebody, then what? Let's say it was just an off day and it really wasn't me. Okay, so the next time I see that person, I'm in a better mood. I'm ready to have a good interaction with them. But what are they basing? What are they going to begin that interaction basing it on? That impression they've already formed. So what are they going to do? Well, they may act a little more distant. They might want to get the hell out of there and not even want to talk to me. So why? Because they have this impression of what it's going to be like. They think this is what interacting with me is going to be like. That's what they formed in their head. So they act more distant. And now it's actually harder for me to have a decent interaction with them than it otherwise would have been if it had been kind of a neutral or positive interaction the first time. So people use those impressions and they behave accordingly in the future around us that way. So that's why for those reasons, that's why first impressions are important. They form quickly, they are not easy to change, and they really influence how people act towards us. So now, if you just made a bad first impression on someone yesterday, don't feel like it's the end of the world. I'm not saying that either. It's just going to take a little bit more work to get past it. That's all. All right. Another factor, something, and this could tie into some of the other things we've already talked about, especially the impressions, but predicted outcome value. We're more likely to interact with people when we think it's going to lead to a positive future outcome with a person. So when we feel like that it's going to be worthwhile to talk with that person. So there's an example like where if we make a good impression, then that other person is going to predict a pretty good, be more likely to predict a pretty good outcome for the future. So they'll be more likely to put good effort into talking with us. And kind of related to that, you know, one thing that'll lead us to have a good predict good outcomes in the future is whether someone's attractive to us on some level. Now, when it comes to attraction, I don't necessarily mean just how someone looks, although that could be part of it. So, physical attraction is, like I just said, how someone looks. Are they physically attractive in appearance? Task attraction is whether someone is good at some kind of task that you value. So if you have someone that maybe you're not physically attracted to, but you really like and respect them because they're awesome to study with. They don't get distracted, and you can get a lot of work done, or they're good coworkers. They're competent. They do their job well, and you think the world of them, regardless of what you think of them. Their physical attraction, you could still think the world of them just because they are so good at a task that you care about. Social attraction has to do more with kind of socially what groups we belong to, what hobbies and interests we have, those types of things. So someone might not be super physically attractive and they might not be great at some task that you value, but socially they might be great to hang out with. They just may be a wonderful person, a good friend, and so that's what draws you to them. You can have all three, you can have one of the three, you can have none of the three. But these are three different ways in which others may find us attractive or not attractive. Similarity, I'm going to just mention here is that there's a difference between actual similarity and perceived similarity. And when they do studies on speed dating, where they actually kind of measure characteristics and see if they really are similar versus if these two people seem similar, think that if one person thinks the other person is similar. And what is interesting about this is that perceived similarity actually matters more than whether people really are similar. In other words, if we're sitting with someone, it's less about whether we really are similar to them, and it's a lot more about whether we think we are similar to them. So perceived similarity can be one factor. Biology, I'm not going to go into super detail on this, but there's some really, and I might in class though, there's some interesting research that has been done on human pheromones. And it's fascinating. It's about having women smell guys' t-shirts and rate those shirts for attractiveness, and then comparing different characteristics of the guys that they were rated as attractive versus not attractive. This is all by smelling a shirt, by the way. Fascinating stuff. But I'm just going to have to kind of tease you on that right now because I'm not going to go into super detail. But biology can be part of the picture. All right. A little bit more on impressions. This is just kind of almost a review. They're filtered through our experiences. So we have experiences with different types of people. So we develop a sense of what the types of people we want to be in relationships with. Filtered through our personality, that shapes how we view the world, and something called our attachment styles. And that's something I haven't talked about. So I'm going to go into more detail on now. And Attachment styles are based kind of on, we have a mental model for how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about others. And so those are two dimensions and they can crisscross in different ways, and that's what I'm going to go into now. But but attachment styles really briefly came out of some interesting research after World War II about about attachment between infants and their caregivers, and there's a lot of rich, deep history to that that I'm not going to go into. But what this information I'm about to go into covers is more like adult attachment styles. So how we are in terms of close or distant to other people as adults. So here are four different styles. So secure attachment style, we have a positive regard for ourselves and others. We feel pretty good about what we can offer others, and we feel pretty good about what they can offer us. Avoidant, quite the opposite. We don't really think we have a lot to offer other people, and we're not that thrilled with other people either. We don't think they're all that great either, that they have that much to offer us. And by the way, offer, I don't mean in terms of resources like money. I just mean like are they worthwhile relational partners? Is it worth our trouble to approach others and be in relationships with others? Is there a good payoff there? All right. So anyway, dismissive. We feel reasonably positive about ourselves, but not as much about others. We can kind of take or leave others, so we feel pretty good about ourselves, but not others. And then preoccupied, we doubt what we can bring. We're not secure in what we have to offer, but we really value what others have to offer. So what does this look like in graphic form? So first of all, just let me explain this. Don't worry about dependence and avoidance. Um, what I want you to look at are these four terms and general what they mean. So what we have over here is our thoughts of others, positive thoughts of others, negative thoughts of others, positive thoughts of ourselves, negative thoughts of ourselves. And so these are the same things from the previous slide, just in graph form. So let's look at negative of ourselves, negative of others. This person has trouble attaching to others. They feel like, first of all, they're not sure. They're not confident what they have to offer. Um, so they feel like they're likely to be rejected, and so they fear that kind of rejection, and but also there's some distance there from other people because they don't necessarily think of others that highly. So they're somewhat avoidant too of other people. So it's kind of a double whammy, and that can be challenging for relationships, for these individuals. On the other side, secure, fairly comfortable with what others can offer and what they can offer. It doesn't mean it's perfect and that they never have problems and that this is the best one and we all should feel like horrible losers if we don't have it. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that, when it comes to, attaching to others, this is more in their comfort zone and they feel fairly good and on solid ground in terms of that. Dismissive. These are the ones that feel good about themselves, less good about others. So probably the type that confident, kind of being on their own if they have to. They're not necessarily caught up with whether others like them or want to be in a close relationship with them. So yeah, these might be a little more distant. Yeah, not that they don't get into relationships or can't, but they might be more distant than the average person in a relationship, but in a confident way, not in a afraid of rejection kind of way. They're less concerned about rejection. Preoccupied. These types value the relationships with other people, but they're not necessarily secure in those relationships. They worry that they might get rejected, and it really, unlike the fearful avoidant people down here, it really matters to them because those relationships really matter to them. So you could see where this could be a real struggle, especially if they're together with a dismissive type of person, because a dismissive person is not going to be giving them much reassurance. The dismissive person's going to be kind of, keeping them at arm's length, and this person's going to be like, what's going on here? Do they not like me? So a lot of self-doubt in here, and a lot of eagerness still, though, to be in relationships, but struggling in those sometimes with their own security within the relationship. So why do I cover this? This may help you see some patterns in yourself or your friends or significant others that help you make more sense. The point isn't to point to this one and say they're the best and everyone else are horrible. The point is to help you understand that this may explain why people behave a certain way. People that if you know someone who behaves kind of in a peculiar way, it doesn't mean it's because of this, but it could be. So I covered it in that spirit. All right, this is just a really quick review. Few factors we talked about. I'm not saying these are the only factors, but this is a pretty solid list in terms of proximity, impressions, types of attraction, the different things that our perceptions are filtered through, like personality and attachment style, the possible influence of biology, all of those things. So we'll apply this and more in class.